there are a lot of fitan involved in just having a phone. Yeah. Or just having a laptop or computer or just having internet. How does one, as a Muslim, and especially with this, our audience, a lot of our audience are like young Muslim brothers and sisters, and how would one tackle such things? Because we can't remove access to devices, internet. It's not possible anymore.
Yeah, I get what you mean. One of the biggest ones, obviously, corruptive forces, I think, like I would call is pornography, obviously. Like,
right.
And this is, I mean, I think we can tackle this because I haven't really spoken about this topic properly. But I think we can tackle this topic in a variety of different ways. You can think of the social, you can say social effects of pornography. Yeah, and you can also think about the psychological effects. So kind of to dichotomize it, make it into two different things. It's two different.
The social and the what? Sorry.
Social and psychological.
Social.
So social is more to do with obviously the collective societal unit, and then obviously psychological, we mean more about the individual.
Fine.
So talking about the social is interesting because actually the feminists disagree upon this, and feminist discourse is actually splintered on this issue, and this is actually referred to as the feminist sex wars, whereas or some other names like this, where basically feminists are disagreeing whether pornography is a good thing or a bad thing.
Okay.
So some of them obviously have been very, very much against it, like Andrea, I forget her surname, but she's a radical feminist.
Against pornography?
Yeah, she's against pornography. Okay. She's written...
But just as a side note, I'm probably going to be butting in like a lot, and like, because Allahumma barik, I think you overestimate how intelligent we are, and so sometimes when I want to break
No, you're doing the right thing.
I want to break it down. Yeah, so go ahead, keep going.
So basically, like the question is this: what is the debate all about? There was another book very, very famous called Pornified, written by Pamela Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, Pamela Paul. She wrote a book called Pornified, and basically although there are some methodological limitations of that book, because she goes into sociology and stuff. Basically, the argument is that pornography, from a sociological perspective, it links to rape, it links to child abuse. And when we say child abuse, we're talking about well under the age of 18, like maybe we're talking about even 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, things like that. And we're talking about incest, like people become more interested in people in their own family, stuff like that. And we're talking about things... commodification, objectification of women. Yeah, so that's the argument that the kind of, you could say, radical feminists or other feminists who disagree, and other people, not just feminists, right, who disagree with the idea of pornography on a societal level put forward. And actually, there is some very compelling evidence to that in terms of how much pornography is actually linked to these things that we've just mentioned. It is linked quite a lot. And actually, the FBI, the amount of cases that they've had to deal with in terms of child pornography and child abuse in the last 10 to 20 years has been like exponential comparative to what came before it. So there is strong evidence that actually, because of there is a physiological, psychological, neurological reasoning behind it. So when someone watches pornography, obviously dopamine is secreted from the brain, and this is going more to the physiological side of it. And they want to see more and more hardcore stuff. And it actually becomes an addiction. And this is actually something which is in society well established. Even the NHS, now they've labeled it as a kind of psychological disorder, a sex addiction, and underneath that, pornography addiction.
Really?
I think, they definitely the NHS. The DSM have, which is the manual. The DSM manual is the psychological manual that they renew every decade or so, and which kind of lists all the psychological disorders, and this is one of them. So pornography is first and foremost a social problem, because it does more against the cause of women. It degenerates them, it commodifies them, objectifies them. But also here you have the problem of now we're going on to the second strand of the psychological problem.
Okay, before we go into psychological, you were mentioning about feminists who were anti-pornography. Are there feminists who are pro it?
Yeah, there are. They're feminists. They're basically usually liberal feminists, and they argue that women can do. Okay. Usually, the argument is that you can do whatever you want with your body, and the woman expressing herself in that way should be okay. But however, the counter argument to that is that the liberal premise, as per John Stuart Mill's harm principle and stuff like that, is that you're free to do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anyone else.
Okay.
But then the counter argument would be that actually the pornography industry by degenerating women and by commodifying them, objectifying them is harming other women.
It is harming.
And it's because it's moving in the direction of rape, it's moving in the direction of child abuse, and that's where it becomes a very serious argument. Because when you're saying that, okay, actually, pornography has the effect of a human being, whereby they actually need now to enact some of the things that they're doing, and they want to go more and more hardcore, and there's evidence of this, whereby it's more likely to reach pedophilic proportions, and it goes to that extent. Then we say, okay, well, hold on now, because now we're talking about children's rights, and now we're talking about other women's rights, and we're talking about human trafficking, because actually there's a link between pornography and human trafficking. And it enhances this entitlement within men, because men become much more entitled when it comes to pornography. And they're like, okay, they have this sensuality now. They want to just click a button and be titillized straight away.
What does titillized mean?
It just means stimulated.
Okay, fine.
Stimulate, click the button, be titillized, and basically that's the job done. So that gives them a sense of entitlement, and from that perspective, now they feel like they can go left, right, and center, telling women to do things for them as if they have the right to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So from a sociological perspective, even a feminist, an ardent radical feminist like Andrea, I forget her name, and Naomi, I forget her surname as well. But and obviously Pamela Paul and others. They would all argue that basically this is a social ill, which does more to degenerate the case of women and to put them under the feet of the patriarchal foot of the man.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there's a second strand, as you're saying, of the kind of psychological basis of.
So this is where it gets really, really interesting, and I want to connect this to sexual intercourse, actually, generally speaking, because it's a bit of a taboo topic, and I don't think Muslims talk about it enough, frankly. I feel like Muslims today talk about it less than the Muslims of yesterday. In the sense that I feel like there's a lot in the Quran and Sunnah about sexual intercourse, a lot in the scholarly works about sexual intercourse. But for cultural reasons, basically, like, we've made it a taboo topic that we don't talk about it no more.
What about those who say that, like obviously we know the impact, the importance of shyness in Iman, and that's like kind of a topic that's seen as to be like shy of speaking.
Yeah, okay, I'm not saying speak about it all the time. In the Quran it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy from the truth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So here, this is where I feel like sometimes it is healthy to talk about these things.
Fine.
So let me first and foremost say, like, psychological terms, there's a lot of research that's been done. Like, I forget the studies now, but basically there are studies that show that basically, as we said before, pornography is a psychological disorder when it's actually an addiction. Yeah, even when it's not an addiction, it can become an addiction quite easily, and that is because when someone watches that stuff, basically they become more accustomed to it, and it becomes more normal for them. So they want more of a kick next time, so it becomes more and more hardcore. So this dopamine rush that they keep wanting drives them to watch it more and more. This is linked by many, like, for example, there's a guy called Ian Kerner. He links this with things like bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression.
Okay.
Why? Because actually a lot of people, when they feel basically sad, to put it in a simple way, when they feel sad, they watch pornography, or they feel lazy, they watch or they feel bored, they watch pornography. So when they watch that, what happens is that becomes like their recourse, their psychological recourse. So instead of dealing with the anxiety that they may, a pre-existing anxiety that they may have, think of it as a crack on a windscreen, yeah?
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with it cognitively and thinking about it, they just retreat to just quick solutions. So think of it like comfort food.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So someone who's got problems on his hands, or has got things that they've got to do, instead of dealing with those things or thinking about those problems, think about solutions, cognitive and psychological solutions, they just start eating chocolates and start indulging in ice cream.
Right.
From that perspective, all that does is it kind of puts an artificial cover of the problem. So actually what this does, it gives one a very quick, short-term kind of comfort. And that's what pornography does.
Right.
So it gives someone very, very quick. And when we say very quick, by the way, there are statistics that tell us how quick it is. So, for example, there's one sexual pornography website with BuzzFeed that done like a study using Google Analytics, and they've basically been able to track how many people go into pornography websites. And they said about 30% in the UK. In the UK and the West generally are women. In Brazil, there was a higher number of women. In the Muslim world, there's a bit less number of women. Anyways, the point is, there's a lot of women going on pornography. The topics are another interesting, like what they actually research. and that could be another thing we could talk about. But they go on it, and basically when they go on the pornography website, they spend on average watching a video about 6 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
So think of it this way: a consumer goes on the pornography website for about 6 to 7 minutes, because that's enough to get them to almost climax.
Right.
So they will kind of 6-7 minutes. That's the average according to this kind of thing, and then after that they climax by masturbating usually, and then after that they feel a sense of relief. Now 6 to 7 minutes of pleasure is not going to cope your problem in life.
Right.
It's not going to help your anxiety in life.
Right.
This is actually, and what's really ironic about it, and this links to another problem, sociological problem, which actually, subhanallah, Islam has a cure for this. Like, it really is interesting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next, to be honest. It was going to be if there are people who have this addiction and they want to stop, etc., etc.
What do they do?
Right.
Okay, so let me just quickly finish off what I was saying about the problem. So this issue, and by the way, it's not just anxiety and bipolar disorder and depression. It also links to some studies, which I'm not sure how reliable they are, but I can look into it, which talks about reducing the size of the brain. It actually reduces. So being a porn addict reduces the size of the physical human brain. Okay. So it has it neurologically rewires your brain. Watching porn, it's a serious addiction. Like, you can be addicted to things that people don't realize that you can be. For example, sugar. People can be addicted to sugar. Even from a secular perspective. Here I'm talking from a secular perspective. We know spiritually it's haram. I'm not going to say this because everyone knows it. Like, okay, pornography is haram. Of course we know it's prohibited in Islam for so many reasons, right? So that's why I'm not going down that route, because everyone has heard this before.
Right.
Even as a Christian, you would have heard in the Bible it says that you're looking at a woman lustfully is like committing adultery with her. Jesus. So it's well known, like in religious faiths, that this is a bad thing, right? It's haram, well known. But here we're talking like, even from a secular perspective, a porn addict is a depressed, anxious, bipolar disorder. Like, it's possible for that person to have bipolar disorder kind of person. He's at risk, or she's at risk. So that's the issue. And what is even worse than this is, and this is the irony, and it goes back to the discussion we're having about feminism, is that 29%, and I'll try and get you the study, hopefully on my phone or something. I might have a note or something on this. Listen to this, right? 29% of women who report, like, there's sociological studies done in America at one of the universities, yeah, and they said over 75% of men, when they have sexual intercourse, they climax. Basically, they climax, yeah, and less than 29% of women climax. One of the issues of this is because men, and remember, men are the majority consumers of pornography. Right? So men are the majority consumers of pornography. So for that reason, they're used to that instant gratification. But one of the side effects of pornography is that it actually hinders someone's sexual life. As we know, so there was a study done by, like, there's this organization called JAMA, yeah? JAMA, or I don't know how to pronounce it. Either JAMA or JMA. And they said that basically, that watching pornography excessively, it dulls sexual activity. So basically, when you watch more of it, you become less pleasured with sex.
Okay.
Sex, because this is straightforward finding, right? Now, how do you compare this, and why am I mentioning this? It's really interesting, right? Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually gave us guidance on how to have sexual intercourse. Okay, now this might sound a bit taboo, a bit weird, a bit whatever, but when you consider the state of affairs in the Western world, because these studies are kind of like a microcosm of the Western world, and I'm not saying that every man can't satisfy, like a majority of men can't satisfy women in the West, because that would be quite harsh for me to say that, and I don't think a small-scale sociological experiment could prove that.
Fine.
But what I am saying is that there's a stress in Islam. Because a lot of people, do you know the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam where it says that if a woman doesn't give her husband sexual intercourse, that the angels will curse her?
Yes. Oh, is that what it was? Okay, fine.
A lot of people quote that and say, well, how comes it's not an equivalent for the women?
Yeah.
They have not read the Islamic corpus, because actually there is so many ahadith talking about the importance of a man pleasuring a woman.
Okay. So
for example, like, Muslims are given guidance in the Islamic discourse of how to pleasure a woman. And some of the guidances are mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya in his a book called Zad al-Ma'ad. And obviously he wrote a book called At-Tibb al-Nabawi. Anyways, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya is an old school scholar, and he based it on ahadith. Some of the things, like, for example, that a woman the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a hadith which is narrated by Musnad Ahmad and the Sahih of Ibn Khuzaymah. It says that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to suck, usually the words here, suck the tongue of Aisha radiallahu anha.
Okay.
So one of the recommended practices of a man before engaging in sexual intercourse with a woman is to kiss her and to basically use his tongue whilst he's doing that. I know this might sound a bit... How many times have you heard that? Listen, have you heard this before?
Never.
Okay, so, but is it important? It's important because actually these are the rights of women. These are the rights of women.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you say, if something is haq or if it's part of the religion, we shouldn't be trying to discuss the religion itself.
Right.
It's just it is definitely, as you're saying, a taboo subject, and it is definitely weird.
But look, women are being oppressed. Do you know what I'm saying, Faisal? Look, seriously.
I think it's weird. I think it's appropriate. I think it's good to shine a light on something,
right,
which is like, I'm sure is a situation for a lot of people. So I think it's healthy. It's
the hadith of Jabir, yeah?
Right, yeah.
Which is in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, I think both. Where the Prophet has, he said to Jabir, why didn't you marry like a virgin so that she can play with you and you can play with her?
Okay.
So the idea of playing foreplay is really, really emphasized in the Islamic discourse with women. Like a man foreplay, kissing, using tongue, touching. This kind of thing is very, very important. It's from the adab of Jama'ah. It's really important. Now, the thing is, with pornography culture, what we've discussed kind of here, like, is a man is unable to be patient.
Right.
Because remember we said that like, he's used to instant being titillized instantly.
Stop using that word, man. Alright, but that's your point.
He's used to being
and statistics show that.
Right. So because of that, he's got that entitlement. He just wants to literally finish the job. He wants to get pleasure for himself. He doesn't really care. He is not concerned with pleasure for his other half. In Islam, this is haram.
Okay.
It's one of the major things. And in fact, doing that consistently may give a woman a right to divorce a man.
Okay.
So basically what I'm trying to say, long story short, is that pornography actually hinders your psychological well-being, the sociological environment, and your sex life. So all the things you want to get from pornography, you end up getting the opposite of it.
Right.
From a secular perspective. We're not even reaching Islam yet. But I'm saying everything that you want from pornography, it's as simple as this. Everything you're seeking in pornography, you end up getting the opposite of it. Okay. You want love, you want happiness, you want sexual enjoyment. You end up getting anxiety, depression, and you end up getting a lack of enjoyment in your sex life. So that's basically the end of it. So first and foremost, if anyone is trying to stop pornography, they have to be acquainted with those facts. And they have to have real reason, right, to stop. And the reason must be is that it's better for my spiritual life. Obviously, you know why. I'm not going to tell you why it's better for your spiritual life. You guys know why. Yeah. It's better for your spiritual life. It's better for your psychological health. And it's better for the society. That's a good enough reason to stop anyone from doing anything, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Do you get me?
Yes.
And do you know what the solution for it is? As Ibn Qayyim said in Tibb al-Nabawi, is sexual intercourse. Now, this might sound a bit, what are you talking about? Sexual intercourse? It's not really a solution as well, because I'm not saying, but one of the preventative measures, one of the things that we should be aspiring for, as the Prophet Muhammad said in the hadith of Ibn Abbas, he says, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, oh young people, whoever can of you, and remember he said whoever can.
Right.
Man istata'a minkum, yeah? Whoever can of you, get married, let him get married.
Okay.
The nikah in Islamic terms is actually a very easy, you know this.
Yeah,
it's a very easy thing. It's a process.